Hey, Chris Landry, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in T-Town. I appreciate you being flexible today.
Oh, absolutely. It's a hectic day for all of us and a very productive day around the country.
No doubt, no doubt. Can you imagine what it's like to be in these coaches' office? Because everything that they've done for the last 16, 18 months, all can decide in about a 3-minute, commitment announcement for all these players. It's amazing, and I'm sure it's pretty stressful for these coaches too.
Well, it is, but I got to tell you, it is. We're in the information age, and when I was a recruiting coordinator in this league, we didn't have none of this was on TV. You didn't have the internet, and you just literally had the cell phone. So you waited till a coach called in because at that point you'd send. I would stay in. You'd send coaches out to sign the players in person. And they would call in and say, Ryan Fowler signed. And, so it was, I thought, a lot more nerve-wracking because you'd have to wait. And sometimes it's waiting because they couldn't get to a cell phone or they couldn't get to a phone in the high schools or whatever. Now you can find out a little bit more rapidly. And I think that with the early signing day, which has become the main signing day, the majority of the work is in. And what you're seeing is schools are having backup plans if they lose a player. Auburn lost a player today and then kind of rebounded and went back on another player to get him in. And we're seeing a little bit of that. So there's some intrigue, I think, in the second signing day. But with 85 to 90% of the players signed, it's just kind of literally putting the icing on the cake today.
Well, when you look at Nick Saban and back at that number one spot, I mean, he didn't get everybody he wanted. I mean, he lost some today that would have loved to have been in Tuscaloosa, but Alabama's back at that number one spot. I think the point of emphasis that Nick Saban took with this class, when you look at his signees, he's going back and restocking the trenches on both offense and defensive side of the football. Defensive line and offensive line was a key, decision for Nick Saban to go after these guys.
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, you have to really look at your roster from a couple of years out. He knows who has a pretty good idea of who's going to leave early based upon how they might play. Yet then you have somebody that maybe doesn't play quite as well, and you can convince them that, look, if you come back, this is where your draft stock could be next year. So you have to massage that a little bit. You get a kid that a couple of days ago wanted to go in the transfer portal. a 5-star kid we were talking about a couple of days ago. He was able to convince him, look, this is the best place for you to be. And don't think that didn't have something to do with what he knew, which came out today when Henry Toto went to Tennessee. Nick knew once Tyson LaPointe left that was a long shot for him to get him. And so, he's not as surprised because he knows where things kind of stand with a lot of these players. So they have backup plans, so to speak. And this is a new age of recruiting, Ryan. And I say new, it's been around for a while, but with all the early enrollees and all the early signing day and all the offering of kids, in their junior year, in their sophomore year, you're going to have more and more of kids that go back on their commitments, and schools that go back on their commitments. Commitments don't mean the same thing. I was telling somebody today, when I was a recruiting coordinator, we wouldn't offer a kid, no one did, until midway through their senior year in high school, because that was the most important evaluation period. And if you offered a kid, you stood by that offer, and other schools respected it, and the kid rarely, if ever, backed out of it. So today, the commitment doesn't really mean anything. It's, you commit, but then you still have to recruit them. That's why they brought in this early signing day to get some of it out of the way. But still, you have players that last minute will decide, will change, and you have to be prepared. When they do that, you have to know what's your next move. And I don't, let me put it to you this way. While I think there's some disappointment, they had expectations of who they were going to sign. I mean, they knew they were going to sign one kid out of a meet high school today, and the other one wasn't going to sign with them. And they knew Toto was not going to sign with them. They were prepared for that, and they just, make their moves accordingly.
Well, and I think the need is middle linebacker. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with losing Mac Wilson to the NFL, that's what was kind of odd with the Henry T prediction, or excuse me, going to Tennessee, his commitment, because there was playing time in Tuscaloosa for someone to come in and earn it. And now you kind of have to back up and go, okay, they're going to have to develop some guys on their roster to try to get some guys ready to be that alpha dog on that side of the football.
Yeah, and Shane Lee's a good player, but yeah, they certainly could have used him. I mean, it's not an indication they didn't want him. I'm just saying that they knew that they probably weren't going to get him. His relationship was with Tosh, and I think that a lot was lost there. And give credit to Jeremy Pruitt. He convinced him. He recruited him very hard and convinced him to go there. And listen, you're right. He could have. It's not like you think, well, you're going to be sitting at Alabama. There's an opportunity to play there and play there pretty quickly. But yeah, I think that relationship with the coach, which is why we see a lot of coaching moves around the country after signing day, that had a lot to do with it. I mean, that had everything to do with it. I even tweeted out earlier today that. And again, I think you got to make the move not based upon one prospect. You got to make the move on what's best for your team. But when Tasha left, I don't think they had much of a chance against to get Toto.
Well, let me go to Jeremy Pruitt here a couple of minutes. You look at Henry T, but you also look at 2 5-star offensive linemen. Since you and I have been talking, they also picked up Darnell Wright.
Darnell Wright is the latest one.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 5-star offensive tackles. Jeremy Pruitt certainly giving him a salesman pitch there in Knoxville to convince those guys of going to Knoxville that the turnaround is pretty close.
There's no question about it. He's had an outstanding class. Listen, the guy's a great recruiter. He did it in Tuscaloosa. He did it wherever he's been. And at Florida State, he's a great recruiter. He works very hard at it. That's his strength. I was saying today and tweeted out, there's no question that Georgia is the king of the SEC East in terms of recruiting. They are where Alabama is in the East, where Alabama is in the West. But the job that Tennessee did today and Florida did today, they're making a statement that they're going to challenge Georgia at least. They're not where Georgia is. Just like LSU and A&M are recruiting very well and chasing Alabama, they're not where Alabama is, but they certainly are trying to at least stay within range of them. And so we're seeing 6 programs that are doing a really good job. And then, I got to give some credit to Auburn and to Ole Miss today too. South Carolina had a really good day. So, the difficulty in this league is you can look at it and you'll have every school in this league will have a top 50 class. And I think you're going to have 11 with top 25 classes.
Oh, wow. I mean,
11.
Wow.
11. So if you're Ole Miss, you're Mississippi State, you're Arkansas, you're South Carolina, you got to be excited, right? Except you're 8th, 9th, 10th, or 11th in your league. I mean, that would be the second best in other conferences, third best in other conferences, and you're like 11th or 10th or 9th in your league. It's a you keep running, but you're running on a treadmill. You're trying to make sure you don't fall off. You're really not gaining a whole lot of ground. That's the difficulty of what's going on in this SEC recruiting world.
How does Dabo do it? Because he's consistently somewhere in that 8, 9, 10. He's 10 according to 247 Sports. It's not because of numbers. They've got 29 commitments. He's got 1 5-star, a bunch of 4-stars. But how do they recruit at the level? Because there's so many schools that are ahead of them. Obviously, they do a great job of developing, getting these kids ready to play because they're not recruiting at the top. They're more, in that lower tier, top 10 consistently, but they're always finding a way to be a part of the championship hunt when the counts.
Yeah, I actually think their classes are a little bit better than where some people got them ranked. I look at this, but to your point, let's address that because you're right. It's not maybe what Alabama and Georgia's is. Fair point. But when you look at it, a lot of what they do is they fill in needs where you lose certain guys. So maybe they may get, a couple of guys that may not rank quite as high as somebody else, but it fits kind of what they need or what they want. I tend to do this. I tend to look at like the top 300 or so players that are truly, really elite players. How many of those can you get? And then they can match up with most people. Maybe not Alabama, Georgia, but I would put Clemson's class right in that range. Everyone wants to say, well, this school's ninth, this school's third. If you take away Alabama, Georgia, I think you can put A&M and Oklahoma, Texas. You can put Clemson right in that group with Oregon and folks like that. I don't know if they're fourth or ninth, and I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. They're still really good, and they do develop well, and they tend to keep players a little bit longer. They have some stability on their coaching staff so that they're able to find certain guys and they develop them very well, and that has a lot to do with their development because they have the same system that works through year in and year out, which they do at Alabama, but it has different guys teaching it on the assistant staff. So that's kind of their strength, if you will.
We're talking to Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. Chris, let me also stop at Texas A&M because if Jimbo Fisher continues to do what he's able to do, looks like right now he's going to finish in that top 5 when you talk about the commitments. I mean, Jimbo Fisher is taking a program that's rich with money, resources. I mean, the commitments coming out of that state. Jimbo Fisher, you got to take note of what he's doing there year number 1. Year number 2 in recruiting class in College Station.
I tell you, it's funny how maybe, a lot of the public views it versus coaches. But I know I got a lot of heat when people said, well, why would Jimbo leave Florida State to go to A&M? And I've said very simple, it's a better job. What? Are you crazy?
Shame on you, Chris. Shame on you for saying
that. Florida State is one national. Yes, I get it. But from a coaching standpoint, A&M's had some success. Jackie did some good things. RC did some good things. You got to go back to Bear Bryant. But they've not won championships at A&M. That is a good thing for a guy like Jimbo. He can go and build his brand. When he was at Florida State, he won a national title, but it was still a program that Bobby Bowden built. At A&M, he can be the guy, and trust me, they got more money and are willing to spend it far more than Florida State ever will. And you're in the state of Texas. Now, the only thing that I would say is a drawback is that you're in the SEC West and you're having to chase Alabama. But at Florida State, you're having to chase Clemson, which right now is no picnic either. So maybe that is a wash. But outside of that, I mean, the week in, week out difficulty in the SEC is more difficult than the ACC. But I think that it's fertile ground. I hear this a lot. I had a couple of coaches tell me, "Oh, he's not going to be able to recruit at A&M." I'm like, because if you go to College Station, Bryan, Texas, it's not like Austin. Austin's like real big city, got a big city type of feel and very attractive. And College Station, Bryan, Texas, not all that sexy. But I'm going to tell you, you can recruit there. It's been proven you can recruit there. And Jimbo is doing it big time. And he's got a ton of players, and they mostly got, a couple of here or there from, Florida, California, got a kid from Birmingham, but, Georgia. But, they're just so loaded. They got about as balanced a class as I've seen. And he's starting to, last year, he put his stamp on how he wanted his team to practice and work. And now he's starting to get the type of talent. He needs the type of tight ends and the big receivers that he wants to develop. So got a good kicker that he added. Got good. I mean, his secondary that he signed is really good. It's outstanding. It's, as I said before, and you've asked me this, gosh, a while back, what program is the biggest challenger to Alabama in the West going forward? And it's A&M, and it's Jimbo Fisher, because the way he coaches, the resources he has to recruit, how he recruits, that's a big-time level. And for all the people that criticized and said, we're happy to have Willie Taggart, and we're glad that Jimbo left, I don't think anybody's saying that anymore, at least anybody with a sane mind.
We're talking right now to Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. We're going to tell you more about how you can get in touch with all the things they're doing there at Landry Football in the final couple of seconds. Chris, We were doing this yesterday, and it really carried over really until today. You got guys like Cornelius Bennett out here responding, and pretty much it was a question when we talk about the best high school player you ever saw in person play. With your years of scouting and recruiting and all the different things that you've been involved with, I know your sample size is quite large, but can you single it down to the best high school player you ever saw in person?
Probably Marcus Dupree.
Philadelphia, Mississippi.
He was something else. Gosh, Adrian Peterson was something too. Adrian Peterson was, he and Marcus may have been the two that physically might have been the most capable. Because I don't believe in this whole thing. Well, these guys can go play in the NFL. The wear and tear on the body at that age, you really can't. Those two, it made me think, I'm not so sure they couldn't have played at least for a little bit as a young guy. Give them. They were phenomenal. They were men among boys. Like when Herschel came out, it was, he played in Wrightville. I mean, it was such a small school. You could see he was dominant, but it didn't look quite like Marcus and Adrian Peterson. They're really good. Bo was good. There are a lot of other guys that I thought were really good, but those two stood out to me probably more than any.
Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com right now as we get into this free agency period. Certainly recruiting, coaching changes. I mean, we hope that Nick Saban's going to provide us an update coming up in a couple of minutes. I mean, we're waiting 40 minutes here. This is probably one of the most anticipated Nick Saban press conferences that I can think, because there's so much unknown.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing because half those guys, I think all those guys are already signed and recruiting. But it's funny, he hadn't even announced anything, and I don't know what he's going to do publicly with announcing some of these guys. But it's a lot going on in the football world, and we're really focusing, for your recruiting fans and obviously Alabama fans, as the dust settles and everybody signs. I'm going to have a breakdown of everybody's class and the grades, which are a little bit, grading the players, which is, I think, important. Folks, I get it. Everybody wants it. We want to have the number one class. It doesn't matter if you got the 1 or the 5th. It's how many good players you have and who can impact you. So I'm going to give you the grades of all the players on all these teams. And for many of them, and Alabama is going to be one of them, I'm going to break down every player in the recruiting class with a scouting report on them. So look for that. It's going to take a little while to do, but I'm going to do that. And, of course, we're certainly deep into the draft process and the free agent process in the NFL. This is, without question, a busier time of year than during the season. During the season, it's football games, and it's reacting to what I'm seeing and looking at tape. Now it's a lot of stuff that's going up on the website with recruiting, roster evaluations in college, coaching movements in college, 1,400 players in the transfer portal, Ryan.
Oh, my.
1,400. Okay? I mean, it is impossible to keep up. And some of them are going in and out, which, by the way, not for the Alabamas of the world, but for, the Central Floridas, the South Floridas, and that's another recruiting cycle. That's, if they don't,
you might be able to find a middle linebacker if you're Nick Saban.
You will. I mean, it's going to happen. So, I mean, I don't like it, but because it's there, folks are going to keep you up to date on all of that. Who's in the portal, who's not, where they're visiting, where they're going. A lot of news regarding that. So check us out at LandryFootball.com. We've got our postseason special, our scouting season special. So check it out. It's a great opportunity to get involved. Follow me on Twitter at LandryFootball. But we're certainly busy with recruiting today, and we'll be for a few days.
Learn what the NFL teams and college programs already know by joining LandryFootball.com today. As now, as we get into the scouting season, an even greater postseason discount free agency, the NFL draft, college recruiting, coaching moves, roster analysis on both the college and the NFL levels, all the latest inside scoop on the college and the program, and all this and much more for less than a magazine subscription and that special postseason discount. And do not forget about the War Room. You go to LandryFootball.com, right-hand side of the screen, drop your email. They're going to email you a letter. You confirm it, and you get some great information there, great exchange of information, get some inside information that's not available for publication. All you have to do is tell them that you heard it right here on Tide 102.9. And, Chris, we didn't have time, but next week I'm going to ask you about Gil Brandt because I know you've been in scouting. You certainly appreciate that, what he's been able to do in his history. We'll talk more about that because that was one of the questions that I didn't get to this week, but I know you got more obligations. I enjoy the analysis each and every week, and we'll break that down more next week. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, thank you so much. Take care, Ryan.